Hey everybody, in this video we're going to be covering the sociological theoretical perspectives. Now, there's three major theoretical perspectives that sociology deals with, and I cannot stress enough how important these are to the work that you're going to be doing in our course. The discussion forum assignments, especially the paper that you will write, along with the quizzes and exams, all deal with the expectation that you completely understand the different theoretical perspectives and how they see the world and how they see particular issues. So you might want to rewatch this video, do it along with what you read in the textbook, and excuse me, if you have any remaining questions, please reach out. We can meet during my office hours. I can answer simple questions via email, but it's critically important that you have a solid understanding of theoretical perspectives. Okay, so to get started, let's differentiate first between theory and theoretical approach, also theoretical perspective. A theory is simply a statement about why one thing is connected to some other thing. We will be dealing with specific theories as we go through the course. There's a specific theory on labeling theory. There's strain theory. There's a number of theories, but each one of those is connected to the broader theoretical perspectives. So the theoretical perspective is the top level, and then there's different theories that can be associated with one or more of those top level theories, theoretical perspective. So, like I said, a theory is a statement about why things are connected, specific things. A theoretical perspective or a theoretical approach is more like a way of thinking. Similarly to how pessimists and optimists have different ways of thinking. Pessimist always thinks everything is negative and bad things are going to happen, the glass is half empty, so on and so forth. Optimist thinks things are going to be good, the glass is half full, like that. These are different ways of thinking, right? So pessimism and optimism is not connected to sociology here. It's just an example about thinking in a particular kind of way, right? Theoretical perspective or theoretical approach. The first one that we're going to talk about is structural functional perspective or structural functional approach. Often this will just be shorthanded as just functionalism. And some of the key information about this particular perspective is that this is a macro-oriented theoretical perspective. That means that we're looking at big sections of society or at society as a whole. Okay, we're looking at large, big picture view. And the way that a functionalist, a person who is taking this perspective, looks at society as a collection of parts. Much like, think about the analogy to a machine or to your body as a biological machine. Inside your body, you have your lungs and your heart and your stomach and your intestines and your bones, and you have all these different parts that are all working together in just the right way that you are able to be alive and functioning. If we take one of those parts out, or if one of those parts fails, you might not function correctly, or you might not function at all, and you're dead. Okay? With society, this is how functionalism sees society. And instead of having organs, like in your body, instead of these parts, in society, we have social structures. So there's some prominent examples of social structures, but they're all around us. Some of them that you're intimately familiar with are our K through 12 educational system. This is a social structure. The higher educational system. This is a social structure. Our economy is a social structure. Our political system is a social structure. Our healthcare system is a social structure, right? And all of these things, these different structures, they work together in the right way so that our society functions. Sometimes it functions in ways we don't want it to. Sometimes it's not working exactly right, but it's designed so that it all functions and functions as efficiently as it can, according to a functionalist point of view. Okay? Now, each one of these structures has functions. And functions are broken up into two different categories. One are manifest functions. These are the types of manifest functions are the recognized and intended consequence of any social structure. For instance, the manifest function of our K through 12 educational system, which is a social structure, the manifest function of that is to provide a base level of education to all members in a society. That's what our K through 12 system was designed for. That's what it's meant to do. That's what we want it to do. That's what it's for, right? That's its function. Its manifest function. It's what we recognize and intend. Latent functions are unrecognized and unintended consequences of a social structure. So staying with the K through 12 educational system, one of the latent functions of the K through 12 educational system is that it is our country's largest daycare service. During COVID-19, we saw the numerous closures of schools all across the country. And because of that, not only were some kids not getting their education, but more importantly to some was that their parents were then unable to go to work because they had to stay at home and watch their kids. So our K through 12 educational system isn't designed to be a place to send your kids. It's designed to give a base level of education to all the members in a society. But it also serves as a place to send your kids so that you're free throughout the day to then go to work and participate in the economy and earn more money. Okay, that's its latent function. So when a functionalist looks at society, he sees society as the way that it is because that's the way that it's balanced. That's the way that it's efficient. That's the way that it works correctly. Okay? It's not, a functionalist isn't making any judgments about what is good or bad, what is right or wrong, right? It just functions the way that it's supposed to because it has to. If it wasn't supposed to function like that, it wouldn't. It wouldn't be functioning like that in the first place. All right? This is functionalism. Macro-oriented perspective that sees society as a collection of parts that all work together to establish efficiency and stability. Okay? Think about the inside of a machine and gears that are connected to each other, right? They fit together just right so that when the gears turn, the whole machine works. Okay? This is functionalism. The second of our theoretical perspectives is the conflict perspective. And the conflict perspective has three different categories. One of them is represented here. The conflict perspective is the three different categories of the conflict perspective are social conflict, race conflict, and gender conflict. The conflict perspective is always about inequality, the haves and the have-nots, the dominant group versus the subordinate group, the privileged versus the not privileged, okay? And when we're talking about social conflict theory, we're talking about money. When we're talking about race conflict theory, we're talking about race and ethnicity. When we're talking about gender conflict theory, we're talking about sex, gender, and sexuality. And in each of these categories, there is always a dominant group and a subordinate group. So in social conflict theory, as we're looking at here on this slide, the dominant group are the very wealthiest in our society, and the subordinate group is everybody else. It is not the very wealthy and the very poor. It is the very wealthiest in our society and everybody else. The person who makes $10,000 a year and the person who makes $1 million a year are all part of that everybody else. We'll get into and explain why it is we group those two very different people together as we go through the course, particularly when we look at the income inequality, income stratification chapter. Okay? When we're looking at race conflict theory, the dominant group in the United States is whites. The subordinate group, non-whites. When we're talking about gender conflict theory, the dominant group is cisgendered, male, straight. The subordinate group is women, LGBT, transgendered people. Okay? In each of these scenarios, again, there's always the dominant and subordinate groups. Any group that's in a position of dominance will use their dominant position to keep their dominant position. People who are wealthy will use their wealth to make sure that they stay wealthy and powerful. Anybody who's in a dominant position will use that dominant position to keep their dominant position, even at the expense of the subordinated groups. Okay? So this is the worldview of conflict theory. Again, conflict theory is an umbrella term. It includes social conflict theory, race conflict theory, and gender conflict theory. And contrasting with functionalism, conflict theory does not see society as this system of different parts working together because that's what's efficient and that's what balances things. That is not at all the way that a conflict theorist looks at society. Instead, a conflict theorist looks at society and sees inequality, sees disparity, sees a society that is constructed in the way that it is because that benefits the dominant groups. So our society is constructed in the way that it is to benefit wealthy people, according to a social conflict approach. Our society is created the way that it is to benefit white people, according to a race conflict approach. And our society is created the way that it is to benefit men, straight, and cisgendered people, according to gender conflict theory. Okay? So it's very, very different way of looking at society and understanding and explaining and what kind of questions you might ask and what kind of answers you might give based on which theoretical perspective one takes. Now, as we learn these, we learn them one at a time. But ultimately, in practice, we look at any one issue from multiple points of view. So we look at it from a functionalist point of view and a conflict point of view. And each one is going to have something to contribute to the overall explanation and answer that we're looking for. All right? The third and last of our theoretical perspectives is what is called symbolic interactionism. This one is different than the other two because this one is not a macro-oriented theory. Functionalism and conflict theory were both macro theories, again, looking at large sections of society or society as a whole. Symbolic interactionism is zooming in quite a bit and looking at the interactions that occur between individuals or in very small groups, or the understandings that people have about things. Notice the hyphenated definition here, the hyphenated name here, symbolic interaction. So the interaction part has to do with how we might interact with the people around us, how you interact with your family, how you interact with your friends, and how those two types of interactions are different. When you go to the grocery store, how do you interact with the people around you? How do they interact with you? When you're with your loved one or your significant other, what is that interaction like, and how is that different than the other interactions that you have? What about the groups of people? Because those interactions among groups of people differ also. You're not the only one who behaves differently in front of your family than you do in front of your best friends. Okay, that's the interaction part. The symbolic part has to deal with the way that we collectively understand and define things. And we talked about this briefly in the other video. We were looking at poverty and wealth. So when you look at people and you think about people who are poor, and if you think about some words to describe them, a whole bunch of words should come to your mind. And these are words and characteristics that you have been socialized to think, right? You have been taught to think this way. when you think about poor people, often these conjures up many negative kinds of adjectives. Poor people are lazy. Poor people are not driven. Poor people are dirty. Poor people might be untrustworthy. Poor people might, right? Lots of negative things come to the minds of lots of people when you think about what that means. What does poor mean? Okay? Conversely, think about wealth. What does wealth mean? What is a wealthy person? Well, in that case, oftentimes many people conjure up positive types of traits. Well, a wealthy person is smart, and a wealthy person is personable, and a wealthy person is clean, and a wealthy person is driven and a hard worker. Why do we think of these definitions about these two different groups of people in the way that we do? Why, when we think about a poor person, do we think negative things? And why, when we think about a wealthy person, do we tend to think positive things? And based on those understandings that we have about those two different groups of people, how might we interact differently when we encounter them? Okay, so those definitions and understandings that we have are key to understanding how our interactions go. There's also ways that we define and understand manliness and womanliness. What does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be a woman? Right? What kind of traits do men have? What kind of traits do women have? What does it mean to be a particular race? What does it mean to be white? What does that mean? What does it mean to be Latino or Latina? What does that mean? What does it mean to be black? What does that mean? And then based on those definitions and understandings that we might conjure, it's going to influence the way that we might interact with those different groups of people. And again, not just you, but anybody in our society, as we are exposed to what these definitions and understandings of these people are. Okay? So through symbolic interactionism, it is these combined definitions and these combined interactions that we have that creates our society. So you can see, this isn't the same type of big top-down, macro-oriented, this is, the society is all these systems that work together, or it's this group of people fighting and struggling against this other group of people. From a symbolic interactionist point of view, it's our everyday interactions, our everyday understandings about what is what and what this means and how we interact with each other. That's what our society is, and that's what creates it. And in that sense, we are dynamically creating society every single day through our different interactions that we have with one another. In other words, our reality is only what it is because we decide that it's going to be that way. We decide that this is how things are going to work, right? And if we decided differently, they would work differently if we collectively came to that conclusion. All right? So these are the three major theoretical perspectives. Functionalism, the different kinds of conflict theory, social conflict theory, race conflict theory, gender conflict theory, and symbolic interactionism. Now, if we can practice these a little bit on the next slide that we have here. So this is an image of a baseball diamond. And really, this could be replaced with any professional sport, but we have some of the data here for baseball, so we use baseball. So if you're going to look at this from a functionalist perspective, what function does baseball, or broadly professional sports, serve? What is its purpose? If this is a social structure, professional sports, what's its manifest function? Well, a functionalist might say, well, professional sports is a way for mass recreation, right? People who have been working all week and they're stressed out about their lives, this is a way for them to blow off some steam and to relax so that they are more capable participants in our society because they're not stressed out. They've got a chance to cool out, relax, and have a good time. They might also say that it's a way to build social relationships. That even though people might not know each other, they might both be fans of the same sports team, right? You might be enemies with the person over there, but because you both like the Packers, now you have this thing in common, And there's a place where you can maybe start to build a relationship where there's some kind of cohesion that happens there. Okay? This is what a functionalist might be looking at. Social conflict theorist is not looking at that kind of stuff. Remember, this is a different way of looking at society. Just like pessimists and optimists have different ways of looking at things. So a social conflict theorist isn't thinking about recreation, isn't thinking about what people have in common. They're looking for inequality. And they're going to find it. Because in professional sports, there's enormous inequality. Even though some of these baseball players make $10, $20 million a year, many of them do not. So there's enormous disparity just among the players, right? Some players make $50,000, $100,000 a year. Others make tens of millions a year. Both of those quantities pale in comparison to what the owner of the team makes. Now, when a baseball game happens, or any professional sport happens, lots of money is generated. People are buying tickets, companies are buying advertising, they're selling baseball cards, they're selling food at the stadium, there's television rights, people are buying jerseys, there's all kinds of money that's pouring in because of this activity. How does that money get divided? This is something that a social conflict theorist would ask. Now, if the players in the team didn't show up, nobody would be playing the game, nobody would be watching the game, and no money comes in. No game is happening. If the owner doesn't show up, nobody notices. And the game happens, and people still buy the popcorn, they still watch it on TV, they still buy the jerseys, right? All the same money happens. So if that's true then why is it that the owner gets the vast majority of the money that's generated from this activity? If it's the workers, the baseball players in this case, that are generating all the profits, why is it that they see so little of it? Even though these are big numbers, it's a very small percentage of the entire total. The vast majority of that is going to the owner. Okay? This is something that social conflict theorists would look at. Again, talking about wealth and income inequality. Gender conflict theorists would look at why it is that there are no women in Major League Baseball. Where is their place here? More broadly, why are there no mainstream women's professional sports? Sure, we have women's soccer and we have the WNBA, but neither of those are on the same equal playing field as their male counterparts. Why is that? This is the kind of question a gender conflict theorist would ask and answer. Race conflict theory is why we have these color-coded bars here. Now, when you look at these color-coded bars, whites are represented by blue, African Americans by this yellow-orange, Latinos by green, and the Asians by purple. And when you look at the distribution of these colors across these different player positions in a baseball game, you can see some disparity. For instance, if you are an African American that's going to play Major League Baseball, chances are you're going to play in the outfield. Why is that? Is it because there's something about their biology that makes them faster runners or gives them sharper eyesight? No. Just like there was nothing about the biology of white men that made them kill themselves more often than anybody else that we looked at in the previous videos. Again, there is no biological explanation for any behavior of any group of people. Yet, here we still have this difference based on race. Why is it that the vast majority of all players are white, followed by a close second, Latinos? Why is that? These are the kinds of questions a race conflict theorist would ask. Okay? Symbolic interactionism, again, looks at the understanding and the definitions that people assign to this sport. For the people that are watching the sport, what does baseball mean to you? For the people playing the sport, are you playing this game because you love it? It's your passion? Is this just a way to make a paycheck? Are you trying to get endorsement deals? what does baseball mean more broadly? You've often used to hear about referred to baseball as America's game, right? People associated America and the United States with the sport of baseball. Baseball was somehow patriotic. This is symbolic interactionism analysis, okay? And these are some of the questions that they might ask. So these are our major theoretical perspectives. Functionalism, the various kinds of conflict theory, social, race, and gender conflict theory, and symbolic interactionism. Again, it's critically important that you have a firm understanding of these different theoretical perspectives, their worldviews, and how they might look at different issues, including the issue that you have chosen for your controversial issue, which is the subject of the discussion forums and ultimately the paper, okay? So you're going to be using these theoretical perspectives specifically for your issue. You can find more information on these theoretical perspectives in your textbook. In the early chapter, you'll see a basic definition and breakdown about the worldviews and what these are. And in every chapter going forward, you will see these different theoretical perspectives applied to the content of that chapter. So when we look forward, and we're in the chapter about social stratification, you will see functionalism, conflict theory, and symbolic interactionism applied to social stratification, right? So there's a lot of places in the textbook where you can read up and learn more about these different theories. And if you have any other questions about this or any of the other material, please, as always, don't hesitate to send me an email or drop into my office hours. If you have any feedback on the video or questions or comments, please leave them below. Take care.